Face Forward Media. This is Healthcare Musings. I'm your host, Dr. Hassabolus. Welcome to Healthcare Musings, everybody. Happy to have you with me. Okay, so I've said this before, and I'm going to reiterate it. The Substack Poem CCM is absolutely amazing. I had him on the podcast. The author of Poem CCM, he is an intensivist. He works in the Southeast. He goes through all of the critical care literature and really explains it in such a good way, explains the statistics, explains the studies. It's an absolute must for any practicing intensivist. And he has a fantastic perspective on the trials and everything. He's a great guy, and his Substack is absolutely essential reading for every practicing intensivist. The other fantastic podcast that everyone should be listening to is the Critical Matters podcast by Sound Physicians, Dr. Sergio Zanotti. He's the CMO. Again, he has authors of studies and he explains things. These two resources are absolutely a must for practicing clinicians. I love the Poem CCM Substack. And on June 12th, he published an analysis of the ARISE fluids trial. And this is, again, another vindication for Dr. Hassabolus in the literature. And he goes through, in the beginning, the whole history of what led to this persistent attempt to show that restrictive fluids in sepsis management is better. And every single randomized trial thus far has shown that restrictive fluid resuscitation is not better than liberal. It's not worse, okay? But it's not better, right? And so I say it's the vindication of Dr. Hassabolus. That's the nickname that they gave me because I'm always giving fluid boluses as the initial treatment for hypotension. And in this particular Substack, he goes through all of the previous studies with the early goal-directed therapy by Rivers, and then subsequent randomized trials between restrictive and liberal, the Classic in 2022 and the Clovers in 2023. And so then this is the latest trial, the ARISE fluids trial out of Australasia. And it was 51 sites studying 1,000 adults who presented to the ED receiving a diagnosis of sepsis, high lactate, and hypotension after no more than a liter of IV fluid. And they were randomized to receive either a restrictive, meaning vasopressor forward, or liberal fluid strategy, right? And there was a difference in the two groups as far as the fluids that were received. Fluid restriction led to higher vasopressor use, 87% versus 68%, okay? But there was no difference in the primary outcome, which was days alive and out of the hospital through day 90. So both arms had 76 days alive and out of the hospital at day 90. So both arms had 76 patients, right? Mortality at 28 days was actually numerically higher in the vasopressor group, meaning the restrictive group, okay? 28-day mortality was 12.9% versus 10%, the liberal versus the restrictive versus the liberal. And then at 90 days, again, the restrictive 16.4% versus 14.4%. They were not statistically significant, but there was a trend toward a higher mortality. Now, there was 5% versus 0.6% of pulmonary edema in the liberal group, but it was identified by clinician opinion. Say what you may about that, right? But despite the increase in clinician-identified pulmonary edema, as he says, the rate of mechanical ventilation was equal in both groups at 15%. Okay? Patients in the liberal group, he also says, required 1 additional day of mechanical ventilation and renal replacement therapy, although, again, it was not statistically significant. And what was interesting is that most of the pressors were through a peripheral IV. So, for me, really, this is a vindication of Dr. Hassabolus. Like I said, this is yet a third randomized trial that vindicates Dr. Hassabolus, right? And what I like about this particular subsect is that he says both people can use the trial as further evidence for their side, right? And so, he's saying after initial fluid bolus, 1 or 2 liters for patients without volume depletion, restricting fluids, and relying on vasopressors is reasonable. He said 30 cc's per kilo was always an arbitrary figure, and over-resuscitation causes pulmonary edema and possibly adds time on the ventilator or dialysis circuit. And iatrogenic volume overload is a bad thing. And the vindication of the Dr. Hassaboluses of the world, liberal fluid resuscitation is generally superior from a practical clinical standpoint. A fluid-forward approach reduces the need for vasopressors, which reduces the need for ICU admission. Pulmonary edema is not a hard clinical outcome and did not increase the need for mechanical ventilation in either the ARISE fluids or the Clovis trial. And there was a trend toward faster weaning from mechanical ventilation, but it was not significant. And there was a numerically higher, more mortality in the restrictive group, right? So, once again, this trial does not show that it's worse. Okay. And my main point is people that come into the hospital with septic shock, a lot of the times are volume depleted. They've been vomiting, they've had diarrhea, not eating, insensible water losses from fever. And then we go in and we restrict the fluids because we think it's bad for them. Yeah, overdoing it with fluids is bad. Of course, it can cause organ edema, pulmonary edema. Of course. At the same time, if somebody's coming in volume depleted, we got to fill the tank first. And if they're fluid responsive, keep giving fluids until they stop being fluid responsive. And you can give vasopressors at the same time, peripherally now, right? So that's the main point. And I love the end when he talks about this arbitrary requirement for the SEP bundle initially to give 30 cc's per kilo, and then now they've modified it. And this next trial just shows that we have to be more individualized in our treatment. And I'll quote the last sentence. Quote, rather than picking a winner in the fluids versus vasopressors debate, the ARISE fluids trial reaffirms the truth that the best approach to sepsis resuscitation is the one tailored to the patient in front of you, unquote. He's so right about this. And at the same time, I can't resist crowing that there's another randomized trial, the third randomized trial that shows that restrictive is no better than liberal. And in fact, even though it wasn't statistically significant, there was a trend toward a higher mortality in the restrictive group. So this religious belief that restrictive is better has not been borne out in the randomized trials. And this is now trial number 3 that vindicates Dr. Hassabolus. At the same time, I completely agree with the author of Poem CCM, the person I call the evidence-based medicine guru, that really we should tailor it to the individual patient. If the patient's fluid responsive, keep giving fluids. If the patient's not fluid responsive, then stop and do vasopressors. That's really how we should be approaching sepsis care. And maybe, hopefully this will be the end, that they won't do another randomized trial to show the same thing and to prove that Dr. Hassabolus is wrong, because the randomized trials so far do not show that Dr. Hassabolus is wrong. Thanks so much, guys, for your time and attention, and we'll see you next time at Healthcare Musings. Thank you for listening. Sign up at healthcaremusings.com to get every episode delivered directly to your email. And please don't forget to leave a 5-star review. Thank you so much.